Hello and welcome. It's Carmen McDougal here from the Virtual Assistant Coaching and Training Company, and welcome to our guest expert interview. These interviews are here to help you as a VA to boost your own business and also to help you develop yourself as an individual. Today, I'm really delighted to welcome Jenny Brewster, who is the founder of the Podcasting Academy. And this interview, or the intention of this interview, is to help you understand and discover how to make more money in your VA business from podcasting. So, Jenny, a very warm welcome to you.
Good morning, Carmen, and all the lovely VAs out there. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Thank you for being here today. Now,
That's all
Jenny,
right.
before we go any further, I'd like for you to give an overview to people who perhaps haven't come across you before and they're listening to you for the first time
Yeah,
about your journey to from where you've been to where you are now, and a little bit about the Podcasting Academy as well, if you may.
sure, of course I will. I'll try and condense this twisty road journey into something very clear and concise. Okay, background. My main background is in sales and marketing within the supply chain industry, and I spent 15 years developing trade from the Middle East and the Far East and the Indian subcontinent into the UK. So I spent a lot of time working in Asia and India. I married my second husband, and as soon as I married him, he basically said, right, that's it, we're off to live in Tokyo. So
Wow.
no sooner had we just got married than my career pretty much ended in the UK, and we moved off to Tokyo, which was fine, but we actually hadn't been married very long, so our relationship also wasn't we hadn't been together for many years, so it was a massive learning curve as well.
Oh,
So we moved over to Tokyo. That was fine. Emily went into school there. That was fine. I had Emily previously, and we then got shifted off to Bangkok 2 years later, which was horrendous. It was the most awful time,
oh,
just because Bangkok was quite hard to live in for me as a person. Life is just cheap. Um, Many people have great success out there on expat packages, but for us it wasn't so. The crux of that was we came home in the economic downturn. I think we're looking at maybe 2008.
wow.
Um, was it 2008 when we had the economic crisis?
I
I'm
think so,
clutching at straws there. I
yes.
think it was then. But anyway, we came back and we came back to nothing because we lost an awful lot of money at that point too, which was fine. So you come back and you think, right, okay. And I had the choice to do I go back into logistics, which is what I've known for forever and a day, or do I go and do something different? Um, and actually, when we came back, Neil moved to London as it was his home, and I moved back up to Manchester as it was my home. So we didn't separate, but we just decided I wanted a support network, and
Mm.
he came for the career for his career down here. So 9 months later, I moved down to London. I gave in and said, right, okay, clearly it's not going to be in Manchester. So I came down south, and that was all fine. So I decided to attend Kingston University and took an IT degree, which I really loved. I was the only female on that course, and that was really testing, actually.
Mm.
Um, but the IT degree was great. I quickly realised I didn't want to be a coder or a developer. It just wasn't me. But I did learn an awful lot along the journey, and actually I came out of that doing networking and all the things that you do when you're kind of mixing around people. And it very quickly became apparent that there was a real need for online marketing and social media, and the people I was speaking to didn't really get it. So I started the social media online marketing agency, which was a bricks and mortar business here in Richmond. And all my customers came from face-to-face meetings and chats and networking events and stuff like that. None of that business was gained online. Um, but then to do an online marketing and social media business and not market your business online seemed a bit
Yeah.
daft, right? But as soon as I started to do that, I very quickly realized that it was saturated. The whole online marketing and social media market online was saturated. Every man and his dog were doing it.
Mm.
And I kind of thought, how are you ever going to find a niche or a different angle to speak to people about? What am I going to get known for? Because otherwise I'm just going to pale into insignificance with everybody else who's doing it. So I kind of thought, right. So I researched really hard and I came up with the value of podcasting. I created my own podcast show, and went on a heck of a journey doing wrong things and right things to get that right. And that was the first podcast show that came out kind of um, end of the third quarter of last year.
Yes.
But it wasn't right. And I was kind of on a journey to find out what I was going to podcast about. I wasn't really sure, but I knew I wanted to do it. And actually, giving away social media tips each week gets a bit relentless and a bit boring and a bit dull, and people don't really tune in for that, not really. So I
Mm.
kind of thought this needs to evolve. So this then evolved into my own journey of podcasting to create a second podcast show. Now I knew what I was doing. I felt an awful lot more comfortable. And I've decided to interview experts, thought leaders, business leaders for 365 days of a year.
Wow.
So I've set myself the challenge now to be the best I can be at podcasting so people can't turn around and say, well, actually, you've not done a great job yourself, or actually you're not doing it yourself. So I've started on that journey now, but I'll talk about more about that later. But that's what podcasting is doing for me. And also, I've started to coach podcasting too. Some of my social media clients, the existing clients, want it and are really into it, so they're fine. Others kind of just get fetched for me, and I'm not really quite sure of the benefits of it.
Yes.
Um, because they don't really get social media in the first place to try and tell someone they could podcast or they could even webinar, it's like, oh, this isn't for me. So I'm sure you get that. So I created the Podcasting Academy. Here we are. So the Podcasting Academy is an online program that coaches anybody, but speakers, authors, business owners, VAs, anybody who wants to create their own podcast show to leverage their own expertise and knowledge, to gain credibility and transparency online, and to also reach this massive 1 billion global audience that sits in iTunes that no
Yes.
one really seems to pay attention to. And it's like, it's massive. But
Mm.
we're just not early adopters in the UK of seeing things before they boom. We tend to kind of, as it's hitting its peak, we kind of join in.
Yes.
But those who reap the rewards most of doing things are when they adopt things early, and then they ride the wave as it peaks and it gets onto its
Yes.
crest.
Brilliant.
So anyway, that's the Podcasting Academy, and that's me.
Fantastic. Brilliant.
And that's where I am
Well,
today.
sitting here with me right now. And for those of you listening,
Lucky me.
yeah, well, lucky me, I think. And for those of you listening, do listen to the end or up until the end as well, because we will be sharing something which I think a lot of you will be very interested in, which Jenny is very kindly sharing. So I suppose the first question I want to ask you, Jenny, is, and just so we're absolutely clear, what is podcasting?
Okay, here we go. I'll do this in real layman terms as much as I can, and if I miss a point, then type it in the chat box, and I'll go and answer any specific questions.
Sure.
But podcasting is creating an audio file, so a .mp3 file that you can create in Audacity or GarageBand or whatever software it is you use, and you talk about your expertise. So in fact, this interview that Carmen and I are doing today, I could well turn this into a podcast and pop it into the iTunes marketplace.
Yes.
So it's an audio file, and you can interview other people, other experts in your industry. You can talk about, there's lots of things you can talk about, and I can cover that later too. But basically, it's this file, and you top and tail it with an intro and an outro. You then you host it, so it sits with a hosting company, like your photos can sit in Dropbox. I use Liberated Syndicate for my hosting company. And then when it's hosted, you then submit that RSS feed to anywhere you want to. So think SoundCloud, think iTunes, Stitcher Radio, any of those places. And there's hundreds of pod feeders that you can submit to. But it's in those super places where you've got lots and thousands, millions of listeners that you're going to reap the benefits, because it's organic traffic, and actually you're driving people back to your website. And I can talk to you more about that too. But in a nutshell, that's what a podcast is. It's a weekly episode, or a fortnightly or monthly episode, whichever you decide to commit to, that sits basically in iTunes so people can find you.
Brilliant. And so how does this fit in with all the other marketing activities within people's marketing wheel? Because, you've got networking, whether it's online or face-to-face, you've got Facebook, Twitter, you've got Pinterest, you're sending out newsletters, you're blogging. So how does, is this something maybe people can just solely focus on, or should it be part of their whole marketing wheel?
Oh, that's a really good question, Carmen. I wrestled for a long time thinking which side of the fence do I sit on? Am I here to hide behind my computer, or do I actually like going out and networking? And for me, it's 50-50, and they're both equally as important as each other. So getting that marketing mix right for you and your business, I think, is really important.
Yeah.
And extending your reach. How many people can you reach? Because also as a VA, your clients don't need to be in a certain demographic or location. They can be anywhere.
Yeah.
So for me, the face-to-face networking is really important. And I'll speak about my marketing wheel because some people might resonate with it and actually think, okay, well, that's for me, that's not for me. But I hang around the PSA, which is the Professional Speakers Association, because they are my target market, and they're great
Yes.
for interviews too, because they're always fountains of knowledge in their area. Um, the Chamber, our Richmond Chamber of Commerce, lots of people say to me, oh God, don't waste time at the Chamber. But Richmond Chamber of Commerce, for me, actually, we've got some fantastic people. We've got Vince Cable, we've got Goldsmith, Zach Goldsmith. We've got
Wow.
some really good people in our chamber. Yeah, so for me, doing workshops in those circles is really beneficial. I tend not to go to just the networking events where they sit around and sip coffee, because they're kind of a bit dull. But you can get benefits from chamber events if you just source out the right ones.
Mm.
Then you've got your Facebook, your Twitter, your Google Plus. I believe they all have a place. For me, Facebook, I wouldn't be without it. I use it a lot for the advert side of it. Twitter, I've used it for 3 years and actually just pushed against it the whole time. In the last 6 months, it's brought me a lot of business and it's doing really, really well. So now I'm a huge advocate of Twitter. And Google Plus, I don't really like the timeline, but actually because I blog twice a week, at the moment it's massive, because if I'm with Google authorship, and the VAs, I'm sure will already know this, that with Google authorship, it promotes you in the search engines and it allows your little picture to be found at the side of your blog. So all those things for me are really important. And then podcasting, people can connect with your voice. And for me, that's where this fits in, because blogging, people can read you, but you're addressing a different learning style when you speak to people
Yeah.
as they can connect with your voice. And they begin to discover the real you, and they build a relationship with you. Excuse me. So that for me is really powerful, and also the fact that you've got this global audience that I can reach pretty much anywhere on the go. They can listen to me running, in the shower, in the car, on the way to school, on the tube. It doesn't matter. It's content that they choose to listen to, that I target at them when they want to listen to it, which is really powerful.
Yes, definitely
It's
agree.
not it's not something they're bombarded with, like pop-ups and social media. I got to the point that I get so distracted with social media, I physically have to turn it off.
Yeah, yeah, I can understand that. And you're right, because for me, this will probably sound a bit weird, but I'll go to bed maybe round about half an hour earlier and just lay in bed, and I'll listen to a couple of audios. Some of them might be 15 minutes each. Some of them
Yeah,
might be about 45 minutes each. Obviously, I have to be careful it doesn't send me to sleep literally, but to me, that's a really nice quiet time, just focusing on myself, listening to something like that. Or when I'm going on a long journey, I actually like to. I mean, yes, I'll listen to my music, of course, but I actually do love listening then to an actual audio of some kind. Obviously, not a meditation audio, I have to say.
no, or the Archers.
Or the Archers, no, that would send me to sleep. I think I'm not a fan of the Archers, but I mean, it's interesting, isn't it, Jenny? Because you're absolutely right. When people can hear your voice, they do connect with you. When they can just see your picture, yes, they can connect with you, but there's nothing else. It's quite challenging. And I know for myself, I've had enormous success from being a speaker.
Mm.
I've been a motivational speaker and presenting at different corporate events, literally from about 2003. And that's how I've got a lot of my business, because people have connected with me. Now, when I'm not speaking, then of course I'm doing my social media, but I'm doing webinars, obviously interviews with people like yourself, and I think that's a really great way for VAs to widen their market. Obviously, strategic partnership opportunities are there as well, but people, when they can hear you, they'll think, yeah, that's someone I'd really love to work with, especially when someone as a VA has got this calming presence about them. And you might get someone who's feeling really stressed at that moment in time, think, I just want someone who's a VA who's really calming on me, and they can hear your voice. Um, Listening to someone's voice for a lot of people is, you're absolutely right, is where they can make that connection.
It is.
So I think the question I've got now, Jenny, is how can VAs actually leverage through podcasting? How can they leverage their business through podcasting?
How can you leverage your business? Okay, in terms of what they could do for someone like me who needs help or
Yeah.
anybody who needs help. Okay, podcasting has lots of technical aspects. In fact, it's got many aspects, and I'll run through my journey that I've probably been through in the last 7 days with my very new VA that Carmen introduced me to. Thank you, Carmen, for doing that.
Very
Because
welcome.
actually, my VA found me at a time when I was tearing my hair out. I'm very much one of those, probably like every other business owner out there. I keep everything to myself and I haven't learned to let go yet. Um, and this lady approached me and said, Carmen's introduced us, etc. And I just went, can you do this, and this? And all I did was Facebook her about 6 files and just said, can you sort these out? because I'm interviewing people, what, 3 or 4 a day at the moment, and then going on to US time at night and interviewing at night. I'm just surrounded by these files, and I've got to edit them, I've got to host them, I've got to do all this stuff. And I was almost in tears at the prospect of when I was going to fit this in. And this lady just appeared. I was like, here, I haven't had a conversation with you. I don't know you. We haven't spoken. But if you can do this, then you know what? We can work together. And she just took it and she did it. But anyway, the point being is that as a VA, you can really help out. Because for someone who's doing a podcast show, if they're interviewing, they need the research doing of the person they're about to interview. Okay, if they're talking themselves and need ideas, they might want you to script something out for them or give them a podcast calendar that they can stick to. In terms of a technical aspect, they've got the home studio setup. So in the academy, I've got lots of women who go through the home studio setup and they all get stuck. Which microphone should I use? And you probably see these questions banded around Facebook because they ask them outside of my group too. And they say kind of, which headphones do I use? What does it integrate with? What's the best software? And they're fine until a point. And some are always fine, but others just kind of go, this is too big a thing to take on. And I'm kind of not progressing any further and not taking action because I'm stuck. And that's the point when someone like a VA could jump in and go, you know what, I can fix this for you in 2 minutes. It's really easy.
Yeah.
And that would be like a miracle happening. You've got the intro and the outro, the top and tail that goes on the podcast show itself. So if you've got any voiceover artists or if you're good at mixing royalty-free music in with a recording of the intro and the outro, that needs doing too. And people are asking me now just on my Facebook page, hey, who do I go to for this? If you kind of hang around, you'll see the questions. The podcast hosting, that all needs setting up to make the hosting a success. Lots of people get stuck on that. Now, I've done a training video on it simply as I've gone along and done it, but I'm no expert on podcast hosting.
Sure.
The iTunes feed submission, it's all a learning curve, and lots of people don't want to just do all these things. They just want it to happen for them. Submitting your podcast show to a list of pod feeders, that's a huge job that needs doing, that I recommend everybody to give to a VA to do, because it's probably 2 hours work.
Good grief.
Yeah, because there's so many of them and they come and go too. So I've got a list of those. Website integration with the hosting provider. So I use Blueberry. You guys might know many more options to use, but Blueberry for me integrates the audio files onto my website. I had to get someone else to do all that for me because I haven't got a clue, nor have I got time or inkling to do it.
Wow.
And then you've got the weekly upload of the podcast show, which goes from the editing software. So, for example, for me, it's Audacity or whatever you guys use. Then it goes into Libsyn. Then it needs to go to the website, into the blog, and from there it needs to get put across social media. From there it needs to go into the email marketing each week. There's a whole host of things that need to be done that you can really, really help with. That I tell you what, anyone who is creating a podcast show and they're doing it properly will find really time consuming.
Yeah, I mean, I can't believe there's so much work to do. That, well, it appears that there's a lot of work to do to have the podcast show. However, this is a great area of expertise for any VA, so great business opportunity and a great way of being able to stand out, in my opinion. And one of the reasons why I introduced this particular VA to you, Jenny, is because I looked at her profile And one of the things
Mm.
she said was about podcasting. So I thought, great. And this is where having specialist skills now really does help. I mean, yes, a lot of people do need the traditional PA support. A lot of people do need that. I get a lot of inquiries all the time. However, there are also people that, like yourself, that come to me and they need these particular specialist skills. But not only that, just think for your own business, for the VA listening to this, for your own business, how you can boost your profile, boost your exposure by doing podcasts. I mean, the one thing that I suppose I get stuck on sometimes, if I'm honest with you, Jenny, I have to look for inspiration sometimes because in
Oh,
terms of content, I mean, I know you said, you know, people will go on social media experts, they'll go on social media and put tips, but no one really takes notice of it. So, how do you get inspired to come up with the content if you're presenting it just yourself? How do you know who to interview? And how do you know that what you put out there will be noticed? People will take notice of it.
right. Anybody in business, this is anyone, not just VAs, right? This is me too. You either have to, I'll work this out, be famous or be exceptional at what you do, right? So I'm settling for having to try to be exceptional at what I do. And it's the same for anybody, same for you, yeah? You put yourself out there, so you have to do it differently. Otherwise, you mingle into the sea of everybody else out there, right? Yeah.
Yes.
So thinking about your podcast show, if you're a VA, what would you talk about? Well, I'd be looking at a different angle to do it from than possibly. I haven't seen many VA podcasts actually. I don't know if there's any out there at all. You have to go and research in iTunes. Um, but I would look at taking a different stance. I would look at doing something that my audience would want to hear. So how could I answer their questions? How could I resolve their problems? Obviously, you guys get paid for doing work, so you don't want to give your paid stuff away, but you could possibly give 5 minutes of tips away each week, or you could give something away that might help somebody. But actually, they have a go at it and then go, I can't do it, so actually, I'll go back and see if I can get hold of her. But the idea is also when you top and tail on your intro and outro, you're driving people to your website. So just for an example, hi, this is Jenny Brewster. Find my podcasting blueprint at jennybrewster.com. I've had a great response and I don't forget to go and get it. So you're sending people there. So you will be sending people directly to your website to say, hey, find out how much I can help you. Find out what I can do for you to release time in your business so you can do what you're good at and what you're supposed to be doing. You could do the blogs that you do. You could turn those into audio files. You could talk about them. You could mix that with book reviews. You could mix that with interviews. And when you say who do you interview, look outside of the space that you are in and think right. And the more you kind of test yourself or push yourself to think of people who you could interview, your mind starts to think of 10 more people. So people that might be using VAs.
Yes.
Okay, I mean, Carmen, you and I both know that Brad Burton uses a VA, right? You interviewed him,
Yes.
so did I.
Yeah.
Interviewing Jackie, his VA, right? I mean, she's a
Yes.
wacky character, and she breaks the mold for me of a VA, right? She might be on this, I don't know. But the point being is, you just have to think differently. Maybe go and source other people who are using VAs, interview the VAs themselves. How did they get the business? I don't know is the answer. But
Mm.
if it was me, I would get a huge piece of paper or whatever it is, mind map, and I would brainstorm who is out there for me to go and grab to say, hey, I want to chat to you and I want to interview you. And when you do actually go to these people and say, can I interview you? 99.9 of them are amazing
Yes.
and really open to saying, of course, I'd be really happy to do it. Um, I've never yet had negative feedback,
Yeah.
only the things that people are busy. So they say, hey, can it wait a couple of weeks because my schedule is packed? But that's the worst I've had.
Yeah.
Um, and then doing book reviews. If you want to do a book review that someone's written or and someone prolific that you could refer to in the VA industry, then you can reference that and it goes in your show notes. So when someone searches that author or interviewee in iTunes, then you come up for being
Yes.
found because you tagged them in your show. So that's a
Exactly.
great way of being found. Yeah.
Yeah,
Does that help? Does that
absolutely.
help?
Yeah, definitely. There's a person in America called Bob Berg, who I'm actually interviewing. He's written a series of books along the theme of what's called the Go Giver, and he's a very well known coach and author in the US. And my VA Amanda has bought a couple of his books. And I said, oh, I've contacted Bob to interview him. She said, how did you manage to get Bob? I said, I just sent him an email, really simply.
It's as simple as that.
As simple as that. I mean, I was introduced to him very, very briefly back in the beginning of 2013, because I was actually involved in presenting on an online TV show. But it was a really brief introduction. And I think in terms of, for me, in terms of content, look at what people are struggling with that they're probably least likely to do themselves, but they might try. And if you're giving tips and you sound like the expert, because, let's say with your VA, Jenny, if she was to do an audio, a podcast around how to set up your podcast, let's say, people listening to that think, oh my gosh, I haven't got a clue. So they may come to her, but she could be interviewing you as well. So there's almost a strategic partnership then going on.
There is.
You see? And I think it's a good idea to ask people for connections. If you can see, let's say through social media, someone's interacting with a particular person, just ask them for the introduction. But obviously, tell them why. I would say, I'd love to do an interview with that person because I've written a book review. They've got a particular expertise that's great for my niche market and my ideal client. So I'd love to see more VAs get involved in podcasting, but also to have the skill as well. I think they'll be inundated with business. So this leads me quite nicely on actually to the whole area of money. So how does a VA monetize her podcast show? Because it sounds for you, there's a lot of work. You're interviewing all these people. And I'm thinking, so how are you making money out of this? So how does
me personally, or the VAs?
I think the VA, yes.
Right, okay. There are lots and lots of ways, okay. The main carrot that's dangling in front of you is sponsorship, okay. Now, I'll tell you a very brief story before I go into all the other ways that you can make money, okay. I know for a fact, if I podcast, now I don't expect you girls to do this, but if I podcast for 365 days, so for me, 7 days a week, that's not 5, but 7, I am going to maximize my chances hugely of getting the sponsor deals that I want for the podcast show. Okay, I won't go into too much detail, but I am anticipating, and I'll tell you what, I'm better keep my fingers crossed, that those sponsorship deals will give me my 8-figure business alone just on sponsorship.
Yeah.
All right, that's how big the money is when you start getting into thousands of downloads. Okay, and it's achievable and it's possible, but for me it's just damned hard work. But I don't expect anybody else to do this. Just having one show a week, you will still get sponsorship deals, okay? But that is the big money. And the more downloads you have and the more people that subscribe to your podcast show, which is obviously where you have to market it, then the bigger the reward will be for you, because lots of sponsors will sponsor lots of podcast shows, but they sponsor proportionately.
Yes.
So they don't just do one person, they sponsor lots of people, but proportionately on the amount of listeners and downloads you have. And all those figures are available for you to see in your hosting account.
Right.
Right. Other ways, apart from sponsorship, that you can make money out of podcast, okay? From iTunes, from nowhere else, just from iTunes, you are driving people back to your website. For the first 8 weeks of creating your podcast, iTunes want to promote you and they want you to succeed. So they put you in the new and noteworthy section. And the new and noteworthy section is the front piece that when anyone logs onto iTunes or into the podcast bit, that's the bit you're hit with. So you'll mingle in with the BBC, possibly with the latest TED Talks, with the up-and-coming comedians. You're in there with all the big boys too. So it's a great place to be. And this is where for the first 8 weeks, you need to max out some really, really great content. And basically plug this podcast show that you're doing. So here, while you're in this new and noteworthy section, lots of people who haven't found you before will be listening to you. And as long as you're plugging your website or whatever it is you want them to go to, plug in your freebie, give them a reason to go to the site to build your list, then they will go to the site and they will. This is where they'll be on your database, and this is where I guess from email marketing you can speak to them, sell to them, connect with them, do whatever it is you want to do. So there's that side of it. Excuse me. What else is there? You'll find that as you approach speakers and authors or anybody else who's using VAs or anybody in the business world who's using VAs, you start to build a bigger web. You start to build other prolific connections, and you're in the wings for more business, really. So by opening up doors for your podcast show, you're opening up doors for connections for you. This could be, like Carmen said, strategic alliances, joint ventures, working with people. Things just start to happen. You'll be asked to speak at conferences, you'll be asked to speak at networking events, you'll be asked to speak at or do workshops for people. You'll become known as the expert in your field for what you do. And when you elevate yourself like that and give yourself credibility like that, you're in the limelight, and all of a sudden people who want to talk to you about something topical in the news, they might need you to speak about something that's just happened, press releases, all this kind of stuff, people will know who to go to because you're out there and you're putting yourself out there. So there's lots of indirect ways you can make money through podcasting too, because it elevates you almost. It gives you that media halo that we're trained to believe works, because when you're in print, you're in the news, you're on the radio, you're in iTunes, you've got a book in Amazon, you are given this media halo, and that's how people perceive you. Excuse me. So really there's lots and lots and lots of different ways, but the most direct way is through sponsorship.
Brilliant. I've just had some aha moments there, which keeps happening to me at the moment.
Have you? Oh, tell me then, come on.
No, I can't.
Oh, that's the end of that then.
Yeah. In fact, I was interviewing someone last night and I said, I've just had this idea. He said, well, you got to tell me. I said, no, I can't say anything just now. So I ended up having a Skype call with him afterwards. It was his time like midnight, and he couldn't wait for the idea. But actually, I think when you do look at the whole area of strategic partnerships, that can actually, one of the best ways that you could lead into a strategic partnership is actually interviewing someone that may seem that you can't approach them, or, I know some VAs have said, well, why would they want to speak with me? Well, you're helping them to get exposure. They don't know how, who's on your list and where you network and who you're promoting your podcast to. And actually, as a result of interviewing a particular person last night, it has actually led to an opportunity for me. And that would never have come about if I didn't interview that person, didn't have that aha moment, hadn't had that connection, and so forth. So all sorts of amazing things can happen just from interviewing somebody.
And it does, Carmen, doesn't it? Things do just happen. You kind of put yourself out of your comfort zone. I mean, not everybody will be comfortable with interviewing people that ordinarily they wouldn't dare contact, because some people we do hold in high esteem. But when you do, and you break the doors down and you start chatting to them, amazing things do happen. And like you with this guy last night, I was interviewing Viveka von Rosen. Some of you may not have heard of her, but she's right up there in America world for LinkedIn. She's known as the LinkedIn expert in the States.
Brilliant.
And she goes to Michael Stelzner's social media world and all these things, and she hangs out with the big boys. And I was like, wow. And actually, on this podcast interview, she was the giggliest, loveliest person I've ever spoken to.
Fantastic. And of course, use your connections. There might be people within your own networking groups that you want to support. There might be your own clients that you could interview. You don't have to look too far ahead. They could literally be right in front of you. So there's certainly, it feels there's so much involved in creating a podcasting show. However, I very much believe that once someone's been through your training, it's something that will then become much easier. Then they've built the skill set to be able to support their own clients or attract new clients. So I am going to be sending everyone a link later on today on an opportunity where you can actually come on board with Jenny to be able to adopt these skills and really start charging more per hour, project rates for podcasting shows, and also start your own, so you can really boost your social media activity, drive more people to your website. So please look out for that, because you'll also get some bonuses with that particular offer. But Jenny, can you just tell us very briefly a little bit about your particular podcasting academy, please?
Yeah, the podcasting academy is filled with women just like you who are putting themselves outside the comfort zone, and they want to podcast in lots and lots of different areas and niches, but they're all going through the same journey. So they're researching iTunes, they're learning. There's lots of things we do very precisely, kind of generating titles, generating the benefits that you have to offer. So you're giving a very clear and concise message on your podcast to your ideal listener. Okay, so it's almost like your target client, but ideal listener. So we do all that. We go through all the artwork, how it's created, the things that attract the visual things that attract people and listeners to click on your show. We work through the intro and the outro strategies, the things that work best for you in your business and your calls to action. We work through all the different kinds of audio setup, all the different kind of hosting methods, how to put it together, how to market it for success, how to monetize it, how to get your sponsors. We do all this kind of thing, and you come out the other end, and that's it. You come out with 5 episodes up in iTunes. Now I sell it as 6 weeks to iTunes. The Podcast Academy you can do in 6 weeks. Any more than that, and I think a lot of people would go overwhelmed, so alert. So you can do it in 6 weeks, or you can take as long as you like, because you've got lifetime access to the content, and you can just work your way through at your own pace. It doesn't matter to me. But the idea is to 6 weeks is that you do want to do it. You want to grab the ball by the horns, you want to take action, and you want to get your podcast into iTunes because you want to start rocking it, marketing it, rather than it just sitting on the back burner. But it's a great place to be. We've got the Facebook group for support. You've got me in there every day, and lots of other ladies who I'm sure you recognise and know from Facebook too. So it's a great place if you want to create your podcast.
Brilliant. Thank you, Jenny. And can you share just one final tip or piece of advice for anyone who's thinking about either having their own podcasting show or to be able to offer this as a service to prospective clients? What's that one final tip or advice you'd like to share?
Yeah, if you're gonna help people, in the people who are podcasting, sell yourself, make people aware, and make it visible in your marketing that you have podcasting in your repertoire of things that you can do, because people won't just guess. Some people I can see are still in the era of, what do I give my VA to do? What do I give to a VA? The more you give, for example, to me, the more you can tell me, the more I can go, how she can help me. So that's number one. And if you're creating a podcast show yourself, I'd say whatever you do first, go and research iTunes, go and research your niche, and where your podcast show is going to sit. Make sure you research your ideal client, because your ideal client won't just be anybody who needs a VA. You could specialize in something very specific, or a specific kind of business or person. So work out where they're going to hang out and then target it to them. And remember, keep your intros clear and concise. Don't waffle. Length of podcast show doesn't matter too much, although there are parameters for people's attention, but you want to make it consistent. Consistency is the key to the podcasting.
Brilliant. Fantastic. Well, Jenny, thank you so much for your time today and sharing all these words of wisdom. I think it's it's brilliant. I think it's a very exciting, it may be seen as a shiny, but I think it's a very exciting system to be able to get into. So thank you, Jenny, from the Podcasting Academy.
You're welcome.
Speak to you soon. And thank you for everyone for joining us. Thank you.
Bye.